All right.
Okay. Well, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself so we can kind of just get the idea?
Sure. I grew up in Dickinson. I spent 10 years. I graduated from law school at UND. Met my wife there. She was a one semester exchange student from Norway. I spent 10 years as a criminal defense attorney. I was an American Legion baseball coach. And then I got elected to state Senate in 2012, got elected to Congress in 2018, and got elected to governor in November of 2024.
Awesome.
I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son.
Awesome. What's your kids' names?
Elias and Anna.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing young people in our state today, and how do you plan to address it?
The biggest challenge facing young people, I think, is kind of the same challenge that faces everybody. High cost of college. You spend too much time on your phones. I spend too much time on my phone. And then making sure that we have opportunities that exist, that housing affordability, working in North Dakota is better than the rest of the country, but your generation feels less. We are working towards being the first generation since the dirty 30s, that the next generation doesn't feel like they're as well off as the previous generation. Inflation, housing, tuition, they're a lot harder. There's a lot harder, or a lot smaller space and a lot harder place to be truly middle class in America anymore. And so how do we address that? I think one, recognize that North Dakota is at an advantage compared to other places. We still have it. In that we have, our economy is getting younger. Our state has grown by 162,000 people in 20 years. We have a lot of communities that were dying that are now growing, and making sure that we address those issues. First and foremost, being able to buy a home. That's why we have a property tax proposal that would significantly help with that. We also have a housing proposal that will help get affordable housing into a lot of different communities, because the only way you keep housing prices down is by making sure that you are, one, property taxes don't grow so you price people out of their house, and two, make sure there's enough scale and comps that there's actually housing available. And then that bleeds over into rental property, because if more people can get into houses, then there's more capacity in the rental system, which should lower the rents for people. So there's short-term solutions, there's long-term solutions.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
How was the inauguration gala at the event center?
So we were the first governor that got to run an inauguration after they passed an ethics rule. And what means that is if anybody sponsors your event and gives one legislator a meatball, like a warm over meatball, you run into, I'm not sure it would have been an ethics problem, but we didn't even want to get into it. So we changed it into a charity event. And we themed it around baseball, because I'm an old baseball coach. And so we raised a bunch of money for the FFA, and we raised a bunch of money for the Great Plains Food Bank. And I don't really like political events, so we didn't do like a rubber chicken dinner and a grand march. Instead, we got a band, and we had a bunch of food set aside, and I think it was a lot of fun. I spent 5.5 hours taking pictures, but I think I mean, we tried to put on an event that celebrates what the best things about North Dakota are, and I think we succeeded.
How important do you believe the government's relationship with the press is?
I don't know how important the government's relationship with the press is. The government should be scared of the press. I am a First Amendment absolutist, and I've gotten a lot of trouble in Congress for being that. I have taken very unpopular votes because everything's partisan, right? Like if it's their guy, it's okay, but if it's our guy, it's not okay. And I'm an absolutist on the First Amendment. I think the cure for bad speech is always more speech, because the only alternative to that is nobody can explain to me who polices the policers. Because if you are controlling access to information, the people in charge control the access to information. And I don't care if it's Republicans or Democrats. We saw a lot of this during COVID. Like, we're going to censor it for your own good? No. I have a different, unique relationship. I do probably more interviews, more radio interviews, more off-the-cuff interviews with the press than most people. And I also care less about 48-hour news cycles than most people. I think the press also has a responsibility. One of the weird things that I've noticed in DC since I started this in 2018, and again, this goes back to this chain of instant. Sometimes the press is more worried about being first than being right, and that's a problem as well. And so I think both in politics and in the press, it used to be the worst thing you could be called as a reporter, as a politician, was a hypocrite. And we have now turned that on its side. Again, the same thing. If it's our team, it's okay. If it's their team, it's not. And we have to get better about being more responsible as elected officials. And I think the press needs to get better at, being more responsible at reporting accuracy versus ideology. But I still talk to them all the time because I think it's fun.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you believe the cure to bad speech is more speech.
Yes.
So, kind of a hot topic lately has been the ban of TikTok and then the immediate bringing back of it. What's your thoughts on the...
Well, I sat on all those committees, and so first of all, I think Google and Facebook and Amazon and Microsoft all collect far too much information on U.S. citizens. I believe that. But they use it for economic benefit. ByteDance does not. There's a reason Chinese kids aren't on TikTok. ByteDance is owned by the Chinese. You cannot be that successful in China without having direct relationships to the Chinese Communist Party. ByteDance is suing on the First Amendment, which we avail our court system to foreign governments all the time. But it's not a First Amendment issue, it's a national security issue. My position on ByteDance is sell TikTok and TikTok can exist. I still think, like I said, the data collection of what privacy looks like in the 21st century is probably one of the unique challenges that all governments face right now. But the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is collecting that information on every single user of TikTok in their algorithms are very, very predatory. And so I don't view that as a First Amendment issue. I view it as a national security issue.
Right, yeah, this is kind of my first time talking with someone who knows more about it, because all I see is the headlines of, oh, well, they're going to ban TikTok this day and that. I've never really had a chance to kind of get more of the why.
So all you have to do is ask the former president of Alibaba. He criticized the Chinese government once, and then he disappeared, and then he came back and he really liked the Chinese government. This is not we view things through an American lens. And my wife's from Norway, so she always talks about, you guys' greatest gift to the world is actually music, movies. If you watch TV in Norway, there's one Norwegian show and 12 American shows, right? Our greatest gift to the world is that. But also, I was 13 years old when the Berlin Wall fell. Anybody younger than me doesn't recognize a world when you were actually at a superpower conflict, Cold War, we call it that. But China is our biggest strategic adversary in the next 100 years. And they are very good at, one, they don't have to worry about these pesky little things called elections. So they're very good at long-term strategic planning. And I think the easiest answer when you're dealing with ByteDance and TikTok is why don't they let their own kids on it? Why are they TikTok in China is very different than TikTok in the United States. But it's really the data collection and the amount of information. Think of this. You guys are all successful, you're doing this. 20 years from now, you're running for the president of the United States. And part of your platform is anti-China. And all of a sudden, $50,000 ends up in an offshore account with your name on it for something that is going to be politically problematic for you. You know it's not your money. Everybody else knows it's not your money, but nobody knows how it got there. That is the type of thing that when you have this much information, and it never goes away. They keep it, they contain it, they deal with it. So the easiest, and there's also a reason ByteDance hasn't sold TikTok yet. And the reason is because they're not interested in it necessarily for monetary value. They're interested in it for data collection. I also am a firm believer, like I said, I have a lot of criticisms of US tech companies. I think Apple is very, very much a monopoly in their app store. I think Facebook is very ideological in what they allow online and what they don't. Google demonetized the Federalist. Like, there are real issues with US companies, but I'm also fully aware that if TikTok went away, whether it was Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta, X, I'm assuming a replacement would pop up pretty quick. Unfortunately, when it did go away for 12 hours, the replacement was another Chinese app. So we got to worry about that a little bit.
Okay. To BSc students, many students graduate with significant debt. What policies or initiatives do you support to help alleviate student loan debt for graduates?
So I think you got to start with some of the reasons it exists, and one is that the loans are non-dischargeable, right? And part of the reason for that is because when we started the student loan program, it was to get kids into college, but it was one of the biggest reasons was to get kids who couldn't afford to go to college to go to college. And so if you are going to have what you would call higher risk loans in the financial sector, they have to be non-dischargeable. But I also graduated from high school in 1995. I used to have to sign up for classes with a book and a landline. And I brought a laptop to college as a freshman, and it probably weighed 37 pounds and had 1/1000th of the capability of that phone. But we were told at that time that once technology came into place, you would lose a lot of the you would be able to streamline and make everything in universities more efficient that wasn't dedicated to education. There are more non-teaching staff at every university in North Dakota and in the country now than there were in 1995. So BSc, I actually think, is a good example. There is an entire flexibility of, essentially it's an a la carte menu of what you want to do there. Do you want a 6-month certificate? Do you want an 18-month certificate? Do you want a 4-year degree? And I think being able to cater that to more students in a meaningful way that can develop those types of career paths with the least amount of debt possible is huge. But if you throw more federal money on it, you don't give any local university any incentive to curb tuition. And college is too expensive for what it's providing. And it gets worse when you look at the overall demographics, because there are more people leaving the workforce than there are going into college nationwide. When you have, I don't know how many philosophy degrees you need nationwide to fill the philosophy professorships or what, I'm not sure whatever job you do if you have a philosophy degree other than teach at a high school or a college. I don't think there's a lot of 6th graders taking philosophy. But it's not that you don't need those. I want a society that is educated. I want a society that knows history. I want a society that's read literature. I want all of that. But also at the same time, I want a society that is being educated in the jobs that are necessary to run a 21st century economy. And so I think right-sizing a lot of that stuff is going to be really important.
Okay, that's awesome. How do you view the role BSc plays in fostering innovation, preparing students for a rapidly changing job market?
I used to be able to open the hood of a car and do an emergency fix if I broke down when I was hunting. Now, if you open the hood of a car, it's a supercomputer, right? Like, it doesn't matter whether it's whether you're in the welding field, whether you're in mechanic field, whether you're doing any of that. They have figured out a way to adapt all of those professions into what's really coming forward. And again, they have flexibility in their curriculum, and they allow you to do different pieces of that. And really, I think more so than probably anywhere else, with maybe the exception of Wahpeton a little bit, they have adapted quicker to what the workforce needs in North Dakota are, whether it's lineman training. I mean, they have their indoor lineman school. They have, they are really, truly preparing kids to walk out. And I'll give you a backdated example. I had a kid who I wrestled with in high school. And by the time I graduated law school, I don't actually even know if he went to junior college, but he went to work welding for his dad. By the time I graduated from law school, he had his own lake cabin. Like, he had snow machines, he had a boat, and I'm walking out of law school like, maybe I should have been a welder. Like, I think, but some of that narrative has changed around kitchen tables too. And we notice it in Western North Dakota maybe more, but not everybody needs to go get a bachelor's of science degree and a law degree or a postgraduate degree, there are tons of really great careers that exist in that space where you're not saddled with 8 years of college debt. And I think BSC has done a really good job of not only offering it, but promoting it as like, it's not just a job, it's a career. Like you get to build a life off of, you go get this, I mean, diesel mechanics that's not just a job. I mean, quickest way to start your own business and make money in North Dakota right now, start a plumbing. Learn how to be a plumber. And small scale residential plumber. Because with all of the large scale plumbing that goes on in every community, try getting somebody to come replace a toilet in your house that you're remodeling. Like there are real ways in which you can turn these things into owning your own small business, being able to go to your kid's baseball game or soccer match and be able to do that stuff without having $600,000 in college debt on the back end. And I think BSC's recognize that in a real meaningful way.
That's awesome.
So based on that, like, what would you like to see from BSC in the future? Like you said a few things that you like from it, but where are you hoping the college goes?
I think like everybody else, they have the risk analysis I look at with anything like that's becoming really successful. This is with our CTE schools. Don't sacrifice your core functions for growth. In university settings, in any government entity to some degree or another suffers from the push and the pull of, well, we could do this too, and then we could do this too, and then we could do this too. And making sure you're doing the things that BSC does really well and continuing to maintain that and adapt to what changes in those environments is probably more important than expanding too fast into 9, 10. I mean, there's always needs for other things, and we should figure out a way to do those needs for other things. But I always worry that when an entity like BSC is really successful, they'll expand out too fast to be as successful at the expansion as they have proven to be at their core functions. So I think 1, be really good at it. 2, you guys are doing this today. The best ambassadors for somewhere like that isn't Brent Sanford, who's the interim president, and it's not Kelly Armstrong, who's the governor of North Dakota. It's you. It's you guys. You go back to wherever you're from and being like, this place is awesome. Like, we actually get the skill sets we need to do what we're doing. And I mean, we got to interview the governor out of, like, where else do you get to do that kind of stuff? Like, I think that's one of the things I think all of them could do better, is utilize you all more. You're young. You're not stupid. Like promote. The best promotion that can come for any of this stuff comes from you, not from me.
Okay, so I have a question about some current stuff going on.
Sure.
From Canada, so I was kind of wondering what your thoughts were on the tariffs being imposed on Canadian trade right now.
So North Dakota's in a unique space, and it's one of the weird things. There's some in eastern Montana, but for the most part, we're the only state that farms to the border. You get west of Havre, and it's mountains all the way to the coast. You get east of North Dakota, it's forest and then urban. So we have a very unique relationship with our Canadian neighbors. And we have people, I've actually had northern border hearings for not just border security, because there's a huge problem with border security. I mean, I think 15 of my first 20 cases in federal court were illegal reentry of previously deported alien cases, and almost all of those were Canadian crossings. So we act like all these problems are new. They're not. They're higher triaged with different areas. So I think as negotiating tactics, tariffs are effective, and I can show you today it worked pretty well in Mexico. They're putting 10,000 troops on the border, and that matters to me because 100% of the fentanyl that's killing kids in North Dakota is made by the cartels. I don't know if you guys have heard, but they'll say, well, most of the fentanyl is smuggled across the border by U.S. citizens, or most of it's actually smuggled at ports of entry, not between ports of entry, right? Like, these are the arguments that everybody makes as to why you do it. Here's what I know. 100% of it's made by the cartel. So if you're a U.S. citizen smuggling it across the border, you're working for the cartel. If you're a Mexican citizen smuggling it between a port of entry, you're working for the cartel. I don't care how it's getting there. I care about where it's made. That being said, we're a commodity-based economy. There are things that North Dakota will benefit from on tariffs. I mean, I think oil went up $2 today. Soybeans won't benefit. Canola will be a problem. Spring wheat's probably a positive. But at the end of the day, North Dakota is a commodity-based economy, and we want to be able to sell our products on the market. I mean, I would like to see Canada not dump fake honey on the U.S. market, but I think auto parts is a place where the economy, like USMCA did a really good job of cleaning up old bad NAFTA rules related to like auto parts, and I think most people, like the auto industry is different. There's more Fords made in Mexico than there are in Detroit, but there's more Toyotas made in Detroit. So the market, the actual industry is very different than the politics around the industry. And to be honest, I would prefer we were friends with our two closest neighbors and allies, but I mean, long term, I'm not a huge fan of tariffs. Short term as negotiating tactics, they worked for the president in 2016, and they created new jobs in the U.S., and at the same time, they level set some trade agreements in a meaningful way. So we'll see what the meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau and Trump comes this week. So for the short term, I'm not particularly worried about them. Over the long term, tariffs aren't particularly great for an ag economy in general.
Thank you very much. I really
Yeah.
appreciate this time.
Where are you from in Canada?
Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Bet you didn't know you were doing this morning.
No.
No, but we appreciate it.
This is fun.